How's it going? This is Eric with Beginners Fab, and today we will be accomplishing this. In the last episode you guys saw of Beginners Fab, you saw that we had drilled in the holes here, or drilled out the holes here actually, and then we also marked these light covers to be able to drill the holes and put the screws in and make sure that they fit in alignment and that they fit the space that the factory had for the lights. What we'll do today is we're going to take these covers off, we're going to drill the holes, we're going to apply the light sockets and put the wiring harnesses through, and then we'll make sure everything fits to the Jeep the way it should, make sure that we can get it all wired up, that it works, and then we'll be able to paint it and it'll be done. As you guys can see here, I've got the light here in front of me, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the light covers off and put the sockets where they go inside the light covers, so that when I put the light covers back on, the lights will actually light up and they won't be off center, because we need space for these light sockets to mount like so, and then for the wiring harnesses to pass through the back side. Well, the way that we're going to do that is, since this metal hasn't been finished yet, and this is why I'm doing it before I finish the metal, I'm going to mark these, and it's a little too tight for my marker. I have this scrap metal here, and I will start marking these. Doesn't have to be perfect, just enough to make sure that we know where the light cap sits. The idea is that we want these to light inside the center of it if possible. So I'll just do this the general square here, then I'll start to take these caps off just like so. Now you can see, well, I hope you can see, that there is a mark that's it's a light mark, but it's enough to let me know, relatively speaking, where they are. Another thing is, you could also just try to center it in between the holes here, which is fine, but you have to make sure that you keep in mind how high or how tall the light is, so that you don't make it too close to the top or too close to the bottom either. And then, of course, since I've already marked the two of them, I can just do it at one time, take both of these caps off, and then I can just have my bit set up and drill through all at one time, which makes it easier than having to change bits out and stuff twice. So I just drill all of my holes of one size, and then I drill all of my holes of another size at the same time, and it's just a little bit more efficient for time. While looking at this, there are two things that I want to make sure that you guys understand about how I've got this set up and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it in the order that I am. First off, you'll see here that I readjusted the line, but I didn't worry about this line. And second off, you'll see that I've drawn right on top of this, and it's not very clean, it's not very precise. It doesn't really matter. And the reason it doesn't matter is because with this particular application, I've got to go back and I've got to resand this. I'm going to put some rust converter on it so that it gets all the rust, the little bit of pitting that's there, off. Then I can paint it, sand it, and paint it really well. Having extra marks on it or whatnot from paint doesn't really matter. It's all going to be sanded off, and then it'll be painted over once I have it all in the final stages. First off, I'm putting the light socket here. Second off, I'm making sure that I have it close enough over to the edge that I can put this wire through here and have a hole without interfering with the holes, the mounting holes, and still have the light shining as relatively close to the center of the light as possible, but still leaving enough space for your wires to go through the back. When you're doing this kind of setup with the light, it's always really good to make sure you take a few moments and you look at the system that's currently on the Jeep, because you want to make sure that if it needs to be turned this way so that the wiring can reach and connect with the wire on the Jeep without having to add extra portions, that's really good. Anytime you have to add extra wire, it's a potential short in your electrical system. So if you can avoid that, if you can just make one connection, it's all the better. I always add on pigtails or wiring harness disconnects just because it makes it really easy if you ever have to take the lights out or you have to take the bumper off. Another tip that can come in handy is that you need to have almost always with you an awl or a sharp point to make starting points for drill bits like I've done here. Here we can see I have the 2 holes for the wiring harnesses to go through. Here we have the light assembly finished up. I've got the holes drilled that I wanted for the wiring harnesses to pass through. And here, of course, I've got the mounting holes for the plastic cover that goes on each of the lights. I've also done that for all 4 of these, so technically all of these are wired up. They've got the light sockets and they've got the light bulbs in it. I've made sure that everything fits without touching too closely or anything like that, so that the light bulbs don't melt the plastic and so that there's no issues in that sense. But I've got to make sure that all of this is disassembled, all the pieces of metal taken back out, and then I've got to sand them, and I'm going to put some rust converter on them to make sure that these pits that are seen in this one, for instance, here, which are very slight, and then in this one here, are completely converted from rust over to a usable metal, a clean metal, and then I can paint them. In front of us here on the table, you'll see that I have everything that we need to get this part of the project started. I have the angle grinder, and I'm actually using just a flat sanding disc. I'll have to be careful to make sure that I don't gouge out anything, but it's a little bit faster for this, in my opinion, and it'll help knock down everything real quick. And then I'll probably move over to a flap wheel, make sure I get it all deburred real well, make sure I get a little bit more polished sanding on it. And then in the end, I'll have to spray the rust converter, and then we'll have to sand it to give it the grip that it needs for the actual paint. It's generally a good idea not to use a covering material like paint on a material that you've never experienced the two together with. Because of that, I'm going to use this as a sample piece. I didn't want to use a big piece of metal because I don't want to have to strip it all off later to reuse a good piece of metal on something else. So I'm going to use this little scrap piece here. If you can clamp it down with vice grips or something like that, which I might actually do in the end, that's even better. Using safety goggles, safety glasses, or a grinding shield, or all of the above is a good idea. If you feel like you need gloves, use gloves. It's not a bad idea. And you'll also notice that now my table is clear of all the loose objects. Here in front of me I have a couple of things that I'm using at the moment. It's actually Sherwin-Williams bed liner, so it's something that you guys probably know in the States, and it's something I've actually used in the past. This stuff here works the same as like 3M's rust converter or rust be gone or whatever you want to call that. And I've actually already sprayed it on this little piece here, and I can see it's already starting to work. I'll just have to see how long it takes to really convert all that stuff. Now, I'm only going to use 100 grit for these because it's not an application where it's actually going to get beat up like in a bed liner. What was all rust and stuff has now become a purplish tint, which means that that rust converter is actually working. It works like all the other rust converters I've used. You let it sit for a little while, and then you rinse it off with water, then you wipe it off and make sure it's all dried. And of course, ideally, you wouldn't be touching it more than you have to, because the more you touch it, the more the oils on your hands build up on it, and the less likely something could be to stick to it. I'm just going to scuff it up a bit, and then I'm going to spray it down with the bed liner material, and we'll see how it goes from there. Don't ever forget, once you've sanded, you always need to wash and wipe off the material you've sanded so that the extra oils come off of it. It's better if you can wash it with soap and water and dry it. In the body shop, we always use dish soap and water to wash down the cars with. It helps break down the grease off your hands. If you have dry rags, paper towels, anything like that, you can wipe it down, dry it off, and it'll be nice and dry. And then when you paint it, you won't have water mixing in with your paints. You always want your material very, very dry before you start to paint on it. So I've got everything sprayed with rust converter, let it set for a while, washed it off, dried it. Now I'm on to actually painting this stuff. I've got it set up and I just want to make sure that there's enough space around so that I can actually paint and not be crowded in between the edges and that kind of stuff. Fast, even coats, not very thick. Make sure you get your edges. Edges are one of the hardest things because they're where the paint will actually be the thinnest. So you want to make sure you get them on the back side and on the front side. So you want to put double the amount, typically, is what I try to do on my edges as I do on the flat surfaces. I actually did get the pieces painted up and got everything back together. So now I have them on the Jeep and ready to go. And now I just have to finish up a little bit of wiring and we'll be done. So that is the end of the project with the bumpers. Not to fear, what I have coming up will definitely be more aggressive in fabrication style, so stay tuned. Thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to stop by my videos. Make sure you come by my blog, which is beginnersfab.blogspot.com, and also you can check out through that blog all of my videos on YouTube as well.